I've gone through some of the ideas and some of the concepts that I think are really going to help those golfers who are newer to the game, maybe those golfers who have got higher handicaps, but it might even just be a good refresher for those of you who are even fairly accomplished golfers.
Sometimes it's important to get back to basics. That's true in many areas of life. If you're already building your own retirement plan, it's never a bad idea to double check your foundation. It's time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts that matter to you, the income generation.
Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio.
I'm Jeff Small, guest hosting today for David Scranton. Our main goals on this show include keeping you informed of changes in the financial markets and how these changes impact your money, and sharing tips and information that helps you create the best retirement plan possible for meeting your personal goals. That means a retirement plan you can count on to generate reliable income regardless of market conditions for up to 30 years. In light of how much information we share on this show every week, I think it's important to do a show that focuses on the basics. I'll answer core questions such as what is a retirement plan and what should it include? Who should be involved in the process? What are some common mistakes I should watch out for? Do I really need a plan if I'm already sure I have plenty of money to retire on? We'll examine those questions and more on today's show. Joining me will be Alex Vicencio. He's a private wealth financial advisor and managing director of investments at Vicencio Wealth Management Group of Wells Fargo Advisors. Along with Sam McElroy, a partner with Financial Investments in Chicago, Illinois. And Scott McLean, the head of McLean Tax Advisory, will also join us to discuss his new book, Three Blind Mice: How Today's Financial Planning Process Leads Your Money to a Mousetrap. First, let's answer that first basic question I mentioned. What is a retirement plan? Or rather, what should it be and what should it include? You can find plenty of examples of poor planning or really no planning at all on YouTube. Many are related to building and preparing for retirement is, in many ways, a building project, which is why proper planning is so essential. You're building the foundation and framework for a life that no longer includes your job or career. It's one of the most important projects you'll face because retirement is one of the biggest challenges you'll ever have to adjust to, and not just financially. There are many non-financial aspects to the adjustment, including lifestyle choices, how you'll spend your time in retirement, and where you'll live, just to name a few. That's why on this show, we often emphasize the importance of a holistic approach to retirement planning. One that factors in not only achieving your financial goals and maintaining fiscal good health, but also maintaining good physical, mental, and emotional health. Ideally, retirement planning should start long before you retire, in your 30s, or even 20s if possible. But if you haven't started actively planning by the time you hit your 50s or early 60s, it's not too late. A last-minute plan is better than no plan at all, and the right financial advisor can help you create one that's right for your situation and aligned with your goals. Regardless of when you get started, there are several basic things that every retirement plan should include, and questions that should be answered as part of the process. The first question you need to answer is, when should I retire? The answer will depend on a variety of factors, and some people mistakenly believe they have less of a choice in the matter than they actually do. They believe financial obligations may force them to continue working for longer than they'd like. However, oftentimes that's only because they haven't taken the time to review their own situation with the right financial advisor. For most people, 65 is a reasonable and realistic retirement age. Medicare benefits begin at 65. You can start collecting Social Security at any time, and there are no penalty taxes for withdrawing early from your retirement accounts. The next question that needs to be considered in a retirement planning process goes hand in hand with the first one. How much do I need in savings to retire? And you may have heard some financial pundits try to answer that question very broadly. For example, a popular notion for years has been that you need at least $1 million or so in savings to retire comfortably. Others suggest the 80% rule is a good way to figure it out, meaning you need enough to live on 80% of your working income after you retire. So if you made $100,000 a year while working, you need enough savings to give you at least $80,000 per year throughout your retirement. However, those guidelines really oversimplify the issue, and in truth, the answer is going to be dramatically different for each person depending on a wide variety of factors. Here's some of the important points I often stress when helping clients determine how much they need to retire. A good way to start calculating the answer is to do a top-down budget analysis. That means identifying all the expenses that are going to go away once you retire. Things like your FICA tax and possibly your mortgage. Number 2, be aware the danger of complacency and automatically assuming your savings is sufficient just because you have over $1 million or some other supposed magic number. Many a millionaire has managed to go broke. Lastly, understand that it's not enough just to identify a lump sum amount. It's just as important to have a strategy that avoids certain risks, prepares for every possible contingency, and most importantly, aligns with your individual goals. This is the other most important element that your retirement plan needs to include: your specific individual retirement goals. This includes where you want to live, what you want to do, and how much it's going to cost. In fact, your goals are really where your retirement plan should begin. They're the foundation upon which you'll build your framework. However, another important question is, who should be involved in that building process? And the answer is coming up.
David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, The Retirement Income Story, will revolutionize the way baby boomers and their advisors plan and save for retirement. The Retirement Income Story, the story behind the launch of the Retirement Income Store, is about to shatter many of the myths Wall Street bankers have promoted and protected for decades. David outlines what he believes to be a much better method for planning and saving for retirement, one that doesn't involve taking on more stock market risk. In fact, most will be able to reduce and or possibly even eliminate stock market risk while creating renewable streams of income they can count on well into their retirement years. The simple truth is that if you were born in 1968 or sooner, you can't afford to ride out another catastrophic stock market drop like the ones in 2000 and 2007. Read The Retirement Income Story and revolutionize the way you plan and save for retirement.
Right now, let's welcome my first guest, Alex Vicencio. He's the Managing Director of Investments and a private wealth financial advisor at Vicencio Wealth Management Group of Wells Fargo Advisors. Alex, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great that you're here. I love talking to people from Wells Fargo. I know you've been in the business a long time. I've got a few questions for you in reference to our topics today in the show. My first question would be for you, Alex. What are some of the most common psychological roadblocks that prevent people from starting their retirement plan, and how can one overcome them?
Sure. Great first question. What we find mostly is that folks have some psychological barriers when it comes to being able to get their investment started. The first one that I think comes up very often is, am I too late? If I haven't done anything over the last few years, how do I really start doing that now? And am I still on time to do that? The other one is, can I really afford it? Do I need to, I don't have a lot of additional disposable income, and do I really have enough to really make a dent into a solid investment plan into the future? Meaning, do I don't have enough to contribute, so maybe I just, don't contribute at all. So I think between those two of having enough time and do I have enough to start are two that we see pretty often.
So I guess you could say that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding and people put off retirement planning, that the earlier they start, the better, and there is a cost of waiting over time. So let's get into this next topic, Alex. What are some of the most potential pitfalls or dangers one can run into with a do-it-yourself retirement plan? Meaning, folks should really consult with a professional. So there's lots of do-it-yourselfers out there. What are the potential pitfalls and dangers for folks that don't have the adequate professional advice?
Sure. So I think that for proper investment planning, one of the things that we run into when we see some folks doing it on their own would be, for example, unrealistic investment return expectations. We tend to be very susceptible towards, what's in the news and what are reasonable.
Fear of missing out, right, is a big issue with consumers. So what are reasonable expectations for returns today? Where should pre-retirees and retirees be? What kind of return should they be expecting, do you think?
Right. So depends on each client, obviously based on their tolerance for risk, based on their time horizon, based on how aggressive or lack thereof they want to be. Think of it this way: a 10-year government bond at this point is paying, less than 2%. So anywhere between having all of your money in bonds and having all of your money in stocks, there's a pretty wide aperture for being able to look at returns. But certainly returns at this point are much more muted than I would say they have been in the past in terms of expectations.
I would agree with that, Alex. Well, right now we're sitting here with Alex Vicencio. Don't go away. We'll be back with more right after this break.
A popular investment misconception is that growth and return mean the same thing. The reality is that growth is just one half of the equation. Income is the other. So total return is actually income plus growth. Growth usually coming from unpredictable stock market investing. Income comes from interest and dividends, which can be much more predictable. At the Retirement Income Store, we create customized, actively managed portfolios that make sure your total return equals income plus growth. The Retirement Income Store, where retirees go for income.
Sometimes life feels like it's all about waiting in lines. Lines with no end in sight. Lines you can't do anything about. So are you tired of waiting and want to start doing? If your financial advisor has you at the back of the line, the Retirement Income Store is waiting to put you up front. Our national network of retirement income specialists will give you the individualized attention that you deserve, so you can stop waiting and start doing. The Retirement Income Store, where retirees go for income.
You would never undertake an ambitious building project without getting the right team of professionals involved. Even if you were a professional builder, you'd probably delegate certain tasks to other professionals who specialize in those specific areas, wiring, plumbing, and so forth. A do-it-yourself approach to some things in life is fine, but sometimes it can lead to disaster. Unfortunately, some people who try to take a do-it-yourself approach to retirement planning end up learning this lesson the hard way. The right professionals can help you understand all your savings and investment options, avoid common and costly mistakes, and navigate the dangers and complexities of today's financial markets. So in which specific areas of retirement planning is a professional guidance more important? Here are just some examples. Insurance is the first area. With age comes increased medical expenses. And for most people, leaving their job also means leaving their health care coverage. That means you'll have to navigate the complex Medicare system, where professional guidance can be invaluable. Many people feel, for example, that standard Medicare doesn't provide adequate coverage, so they look to a Medicare Advantage or Medigap policy to supplement that. There are also issues to consider around life insurance and possibly long-term care insurance as well. Another area where professional know-how is important is taxes. Once you retire, new tax challenges emerge, particularly once you reach the age where you must start taking your required minimum distributions, which is now 72. That's when the IRS mandates that you start taking withdrawals from your IRAs and other qualified accounts and paying taxes on them. A professional can help make sure you're able to meet your required minimum distribution obligations without spending down your principal, which is one of those very common and costly mistakes many retirees make with their money. Another area of retirement planning where the right professional help is key is estate planning. In my experience, most people mistakenly think of estate planning as how their assets will be distributed after they die. However, estate planning encompasses the accumulation and preservation stage of your wealth as well. That's why it's so important to have the right professional guidance, because the consequences of making bad decisions or neglecting estate planning altogether can impact you in many ways while you're still alive. Of course, the core member of your team of retirement planning professionals will be your financial advisor, which is why it's so crucial to find the advisor who's right for you based on your goals and objectives. Very often, the right advisor already has good working relationships with other professionals like tax specialists and elder law attorneys. This can make assembling your team a lot easier and give you the assurance of knowing all these professionals are communicating and working in coordination with one another. That's crucial when it comes to addressing all the various challenges that come with retirement and ensuring you'll have the income you need to meet your goals.
David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, The Retirement Income Story, will revolutionize the way baby boomers and their advisors plan and save for retirement. The Retirement Income Story, the story behind the launch of the Retirement Income Store, is about to shatter many of the myths Wall Street bankers have promoted and protected for decades. David outlines what he believes to be a much better method for planning and saving for retirement, one that doesn't involve taking on more stock market risk. In fact, most will be able to reduce and or possibly even eliminate stock market risk while creating renewable streams of income they can count on well into their retirement years. The simple truth is that if you were born in 1968 or sooner, you can't afford to ride out another catastrophic stock market drop like the ones in 2000 and 2007. Read The Retirement Income Story and revolutionize the way you plan and save for retirement.
Now let's welcome back Alex Vicencio. He's the Managing Director of Investments and a private wealth financial advisor at Vicencio Wealth Management Group of Wells Fargo Advisors. Alex, thank you for sticking around. We've got some more questions for you in reference to the topics of our show and investment planning and how that affects your retirement. You know, Alex, the market is at all-time peaks. We see the market very high. Warren Buffett has the most amount of money in cash that he's ever had before, sitting on the sidelines. And the ultimate Buffett indicator is, as a percentage of market cap to GDP, we're at the second highest level since January of 2000. So in his mind, the market's overvalued. How are you advising your clients today to maybe protect themselves if they have portfolios of less than 1.5 million in value? What should clients be doing today in that age range and that price range on a retiree and pre-retiree basis?
Sure. That's a great question. We get asked that all the time, every day. And I think it really depends on, again, back to each individual situation. We are big advocates of, as you've heard this term, not timing the market, but rather time in the market. So as that would explain, we like the idea of having portfolios that are properly allocated based on each individual's overall investment plan and aspirations. And if possible, which I know it's very difficult, ignore some of the outside noise and maintain a diversified portfolio that during good times, say, for example, 2019, that's a good example of that, is able to do well. And maybe during bad times, as markets contract, you have some cushion for the downside. So I like that approach better. Again, using a mixture of different assets for balancing purposes.
So you're referring to really a diversification of bonds and maybe market-based stocks, domestic, global, all across the board. Is that what you're...
Cash.
And some cash too, sure. Well, of course, risk propensities vary based on one's particular client's needs, objectives, goals, and time horizons, of course. We know all of that. But it doesn't change the fact that the market's at an all-time high and that credit is its maximum. The Fed is still doing quantitative easing. They're buying short-term treasuries to keep the yield curve steepening. We had some great economic data. The consumer is very strong in our country. The economy is strong. We've got coronavirus issues, geopolitical issues. So an average retiree today, for an average retiree with a portfolio of, let's say, $500,000, which is about the average for our dynamic of our show, which pipelines into millions of homes nationwide, what do you think they should have as far as market exposure in your infinite wisdom? I mean, you're a CFA. You're very smart. Why don't you tell us what you think there?
I think that for a solid strategy that works, I think having a good amount of cash on hand, I think it's paramount. I think that allows people to weather the ups and downs of those markets. And by that, I mean, if you run into a year when you have a downdraft, whether it's the equity or the fixed income or even the real estate markets, it allows folks to be able to still maintain their cash flow and their standard of living by drawing on cash. And when I say an ample cash reserve, that could be two, maybe 3 years worth of their expenses, coupled with a portfolio that will then incorporate other assets like stocks, maybe high dividend paying stocks, maybe bonds, and some other assets that hopefully add some negative correlation. But I think the cash component is paramount for someone that is into utilizing that income for living expenses. So obviously their propensity to experience downturns and their ability to do that is much more limited. And we certainly take that, we're well aware of that. And I think that's a way to protect that.
Sure. All right. Well, those are all great comments. 2 to 3 years of cash and being invested in the market still with maybe a mix of stocks and bonds. So you've got more elements of safety. So it sounds like you're 2/3 bond in cash, maybe 1/3 the market at this stage of the cycle. The market's really seriously valued, but the market wants to keep marching on and the bulls are still here. So as long as our economy is good, I think the market will probably do maybe 7 to 10% this year. If the coronavirus goes away in a month, I think we'll be good. But if the coronavirus comes back, all bets are off. Well, Alex, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us and sharing your insights, and I wish you all the best.
A popular investment misconception is that growth and return mean the same thing. The reality is that growth is just one half of the equation. Income is the other. So total return is actually income plus growth. Growth usually coming from unpredictable stock market investing. Income comes from interest and dividends, which can be much more predictable. At the Retirement Income Store, we create customized, actively managed portfolios that make sure your total return equals income plus growth. The Retirement Income Store, where retirees go for income.
The challenges that emerge in retirement are numerous, and the main purpose of your retirement plan is to prepare you to meet them. We've boiled these challenges down to a core list that we've shared before on the show, so let's review it once again. The first challenge your plan needs to account for is longevity, and the fact that people today need to prepare for longer retirements than they may realize. You might have a great retirement plan, but if it's only designed for 20 years of reliable retirement income, and you live 30 years, that'll be a problem. As we point out often on the show, 30 years is about what most retirees today should be planning for based on the latest longevity statistics. The next major challenge your plan needs to address is the risk of spending down principal. Spending any principal during retirement is a slippery slope, and one of the most common and costly mistakes retirees make. The longer you live, the more this risk increases, unless you have the right strategies to avoid it. Contributing to that increased risk is the next challenge your plan needs to address: inflation. Most people don't realize that the effects of inflation hit retirees harder than the general population for a number of reasons, and as a result, they underestimate its impact. The situation gets even worse when you factor in the next major challenge you need to prepare for, and that's healthcare costs. With age comes an increased need for healthcare, often combined with costlier insurance premiums. While most people obviously factor healthcare costs into their retirement plan, it's another area that is often underestimated. This is because medical and healthcare costs increase at a much faster pace than the general rate of inflation, essentially doubling every 12 years. That can be devastating if you or your partner have any serious medical issues to deal with after retirement. Another major challenge your retirement plan needs to address concerns Social Security. Although it is guaranteed as a source of retirement income, for most people, Social Security alone isn't nearly enough to meet their retirement needs and goals. That's why it's important to have a plan that maximizes your benefits. As most people know, the earlier you start taking Social Security, the less you get. So if you take your benefits early, you need your assets to generate enough interest and dividends to supplement your Social Security income. However, if you hold off taking your benefits in order to get more, you may then need to fill the income gap from the time you retire to the time your benefits kick in. In either case, the key is to have an asset allocation that minimizes your odds of spending down principal or suffering a major loss. A similar danger exists with required minimum distributions. As noted, the government requires you start taking distributions from your IRA accounts. Now at age 72, following the recent passage of the new Secure Act, RMDs start at 3.7% and increase every year after that. The question to answer regarding RMDs is whether your asset allocation is generating enough interest or dividends to satisfy your RMDs without touching your principal. Of course, there are many other challenges your retirement plan needs to address, but these are some of the biggest that are best addressed with the help of a qualified professional, starting with the right financial advisor, one who works primarily with retirees and near retirees, who specializes in financial strategies geared towards protection and income.
David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, The Retirement Income Story, will revolutionize the way baby boomers and their advisors plan and save for retirement. The Retirement Income Story, the story behind the launch of the Retirement Income Store, is about to shatter many of the myths Wall Street bankers have promoted and protected for decades. David outlines what he believes to be a much better method for planning and saving for retirement, one that doesn't involve taking on more stock market risk. In fact, most will be able to reduce and or possibly even eliminate stock market risk while creating renewable streams of income they can count on well into their retirement years. The simple truth is that if you were born in 1968 or sooner, you can't afford to ride out another catastrophic stock market drop like the ones in 2000 and 2007. Read The Retirement Income Story and revolutionize the way you plan and save for retirement.
Now let's bring in our next guest, Sam McElroy, a partner with At Financial and At Financial Investments in Chicago, Illinois. Hey, Sam, thank you for joining us today. How's the weather up there?
You know, not too bad, Jeff. It's in the 20s, so, balmy.
Well, it's like 80 degrees here and sunny, and as soon as you feel the Fort Lauderdale sun hit you, it's like getting you can just feel the heat. It's unbelievable how warm it is down here. But listen, enough about the weather. Our show's topic today was really about how to get the right financial professional to help assist you with your retirement plan, how to create income, and how to deal with all the various issues relative to what we go through financially, emotionally, and mentally in retirement. One of the biggest questions we have with advisors that I get, Sam, and I want to know if you get this question too, is people want to know how to create income today. So what's the best and safest way to create income versus the same old Wall Street answer of diversification? How do we create income for retirees today? How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think one of the ways that I often explain it to people is that it's not about reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of financial instruments that are already designed to maximize return to people in the form of growth. Just like there's a lot of financial instruments that are already designed to maximize return to investors in the form of income. So a lot of times it's just making sure that you align the right type of investment for the purpose for which you're investing. And by doing that, you can often get bigger results without having to take more risks to do so.
Well, what are some of the investment vehicles that we can buy today, Sam, that don't have as much risk that provide income?
Well, if you're looking at the universe of income generating strategies, a lot of it is going to be contractually obligated instruments. So you can talk about some of the visible things that people are already familiar with, like CDs or treasuries or something like that. But then what also lives in that world would be things like individual corporate bonds or preferred stocks, business development companies. In total, there's probably anywhere between 10 to 15 different asset classes that really fall into that world of income generating strategies.
That was a great explanation, Sam. I think one of the things that I see people get confused about is when it comes to bonds, which pay an interest rate, they also get confused about preferred stocks. And people think that preferred stocks, because it has the word stock in it, they're affiliated with the common stock market. But really, preferreds are considered baby bonds because they're very similar in the structure and design as bonds. But they're also uncorrelated to the markets and considered really non-volatile components. So bond and bond-like instruments then are great ways to produce income. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. At the end of the day, I like that expression of kind of calling preferreds baby bonds. But the idea is that you want the income to have a couple of key characteristics. You want it to be passive, because you want to be able to reap off the investment without basically killing or cannibalizing the very asset that produced the return in the first place. And you want it to be renewable. So anytime you have that contractual element, whether it's in a bond or in a preferred or whatever else it might be, it not only gives you stability from an income standpoint, but it helps from a psychological standpoint because you can really count on that income.
Wow, those are all great points, Sam. And you brought out one of my favorite words, cannibalize. And so all too often we see income plans for retirees where they're pulling money out of their savings or through RMDs where they end up cannibalizing the actual principal value of their account because it's not generating enough income. And so bond and bond-like instruments can produce enough income to offset that. And so those are all great opportunities for us to improve our income going down the line here as we retire or we get into retirement. So Sam, tell us in a few seconds, we've got about a minute left here. Tell me what your outlook is going forward for the next 10 years. Warren Buffett says a negative 2% rate of return for the next 10 years. Give me your take in about 30, 40 seconds here on what you feel the markets will do over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with Warren. And people wonder, well, how can that happen? But the thing that we always forget about is that when the market makes a major correction, it usually takes 6 or 7 years or so just to break back even. So if we have a severe enough correction, being negative or neutral for the next 10 years is not out of the realm of possibility.
Well, I agree with you on that basis. There's no doubt about that. Warren Buffett has been very fortuitous about the markets over the course of his market experience his whole life. And so there is a specific reason why he's holding on to so much cash today, because he wants to be able to buy back in the markets when the markets have a correction. And that correction will occur at some point in the future. We just don't know what the catalyst will be or the event. So Sam, don't go away. We'll be back with more right after this break. You might have heard this story from Connecticut recently. Thousands of home foundations are crumbling, thanks to the concrete company involved in their construction. It's unfortunate, and it illustrates what can happen when the wrong professionals are involved in a major project. In my experience, the core ingredient in that foundation for today's generation of retirees and near retirees should be overprotection. This means overprotection from the risks of spend down, the effects of inflation, the effects of healthcare inflation, and from the very real potential of another major sustained market correction. A correction on par with, or possibly worse than, the two that have already occurred since the turn of the century. One of the most common misconceptions people have about investing is that in order to increase your return, you must increase your risk. As I've explained, that's wrong because it's based on another misconception, which is that growth and return are one and the same. Remember, total return is a sum of both growth and income. When you switch your strategic focus from investing for growth to investing for income, You're generally investing by contract in tools and strategies that are far less vulnerable to market volatility. These same tools and strategies also give the investor a degree of reliability that is lacking in growth-based options focused heavily on stocks and mutual funds. Ultimately, when you're working with a financial advisor who specializes in retirement income, you know you're working with a professional uniquely qualified to help you build a retirement plan with a solid foundation. It's a foundation whose main ingredient is overprotection, whose strategic focus is on making sure you have reliable income to meet the many challenges unique to retirement and to achieve your individual retirement goals, regardless of market conditions. Now let's bring back in Sam McElroy, a partner with at Financial Investments in Chicago, Illinois. Sam, thank you for sticking around. You know, today's a special day in politics. This show is apolitical, meaning that we're neutral. So we're not going to turn it into a political issue today. But today's a great debate day, correct? In Nevada, there's a huge debate. And there's been lots of talk in the markets, and all the major networks have been discussing the impact of what might happen in the fall if Bernie Sanders is the nominee or President Trump gets back and gets reelected. And there's a little bit of a fear factor going on that we see if the potential for socialization and Bernie Sanders wins. And so, as we know, with voters, the voters always do something that's opposite to what the polls say, so we don't know what's going to happen in the fall. So how do we prepare our clients and our client portfolios, or how are we talking to people today in reference to any political risk that might be going on in the near-term future?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And in a sense, I feel like the reality maybe is almost less important than, let's just say, the psychology of how we perceive the election. You know, I think about when the last administration was taking office, you know, we saw this meteoric surge from November 2016 was it, to maybe March of 2017, when the new administration hadn't even taken office and there really wasn't anything that had happened from a policy standpoint. So I think one of the things we have to look at is, regardless of your political affiliation, one thing that we do know is that, you know, quote unquote, Wall Street, in a sense, is very favorable with the current administration. So if things start to change, it's not even a matter necessarily of how the policy is going to impact the economy. The question more is perception of what we think is going to happen, and if that has enough momentum to then start to shift and change things.
Yeah, I think that corporate America is terrified of higher taxes, additional requirements for environmental concerns by way of cap and trade policies on pollution. And CapEx spending might be reduced if we go into, let's say, a socialistic component, because socialism really doesn't work. We've seen that across the world fail time over time again. But yet, for some reason, some part of the Democratic platform, whether it's going to be Sanders or Bloomberg or Biden or Warren or whoever the candidate is going to adopt some type of a socialistic approach in their platform, and that's going to become part of the Democratic message in the fall, which I think economically is not good for the country in the short term and the long term, and it's not good for retirement savings. And so, would you agree with that concern, or do you think that we're being ridiculous in terms of what that concern should be for our clients?
It's hard to tell, because I think a lot of things from a political standpoint are changing relative to the way that they used to be maybe decades ago. In a sense, I think that it's fair enough to say that if you move too close towards socialism, that has ramifications on any, supply-demand based economy. I think that there's just no way around it. Now, whether or not what we're seeing so far in terms of the potential candidates is a true representation of what the party platform will really look like and who ultimately gets the nomination, I don't know if we can make that determination yet. So I think
you're exactly right about that, Sam. We can't. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Sam McElroy, thanks for joining us today. Coming up, author Scott McLean will join us to talk about his new book, 3 Blind Mice. Welcome back to The Income Generation. Let's bring in our final guest today, Scott McLean, the head of the McLean Tax Advisory Group in Waretown, New Jersey. Scott's the author of a new book coming out in April called Three Blind Mice: How Today's Financial Planning Process Leads Your Money to a Mousetrap. And Scott, I got to tell you, your book is perfectly fit for our topic today in relation to how to build a foundation to a retirement plan. And that was the topic of our show. And so come right out and tell us, how did you come up with the title Three Blind Mice? And how does your book help retirees and pre-retirees prepare for retirement?
Jeff, thanks for letting me join you today. I really appreciate it. And you look good, but you look better every day. Thanks for letting me come on. Jeff, the reason why I came up with that book was, I've been in the business since 1983. And in that business since 1983 to current, what I find is so many financial guys and girls are trying to sell people a product, but are they trying to help them? And what I find out in my business, when I work with somebody, I want to look at the tax returns, because the tax returns is a great, great study of where to invest the money. Is it going to cause them more taxes or less taxes? But on top of that, just today in a seminar I did with someone, and then of course they came to my seminar and came into me for the first time, I found out they had a disabled child. And I found out all the money went to the disabled child, causing what? Well, they would lose all the benefits until that money is spent down. Not paying attention to the legal aspects as well as the tax aspects is going to destroy and cause more mousetraps than ever. This needs to be fixed. Thus, that's where the book came.
So the title of the book, Three Blind Mice, really came from the idea of what happens when people lose money due to mousetraps and taxes and bad investments?
Yeah, those are your three guys. The three guys in most people's lives or gals, I should say, would be your financial guy or gal, your tax advisor, and your lawyer. When do those three entities get together and talk about you? When do they really look at all the tools and all the advanced planning stuff? When do they get together and study each other's stuff to really make sure that that client, the person sitting in front of me, is bulletproof, not getting stuck in all the traps that are out there in the financial world, the tax world, and the legal world, such as today as a client I met with again.
So your book ties off how those three professionals should help you in developing a foundational retirement plan that's rock solid when you cover the legal, the tax, and the financial. And we got about 10 seconds, Scott, so is that correct?
Yep, that's perfect, Jeff. That's perfect.
Excellent. Well, listen, Scott, I couldn't agree with you more. The book is perfect timing for what's happening right now in our show. And so we'll be back in a minute. All right, Scott, well, thanks for joining us today. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining us for another special episode of The Income Generation. I'd also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers, and of course David Scranton for allowing me to guest host another episode of the show. Every once in a while, it's important to get back to basics, and that's true when it comes to retirement planning. Your retirement plan is the foundation and framework you build for the life you live after you've stopped working, no longer have your job as a source of income or your company's health insurance. Here are some key points to remember about that building process. Make sure your plan includes the basic ingredients and answer these core questions. When will I retire? How much savings do I need? And what are my specific goals for retirement? Make sure it's a holistic plan geared toward ensuring not just your financial good health, but your physical, mental, and emotional good health as well. Make sure it's assembled with help from the right team of professionals, those qualified to help you manage complex issues around things like insurance, taxes, and estate planning. Make sure it identifies and addresses all the many challenges unique to retirement, which include things like longevity, inflation, healthcare inflation, Social Security, RMDs, and the risk of spending down principal. Finally, make sure your plan is built on a solid foundation. In today's unprecedented age of economic uncertainty, I believe that means a foundation in which overprotection is both the main ingredient and top priority. That is the kind of foundation that a financial advisor who specializes in retirement income is uniquely qualified to help you build. Thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement and really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date. And right here is where you can do it. I'm Jeff Small in for David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.
A popular investment misconception is that growth and return mean the same thing. The reality is that growth is just one half of the equation. Income is the other. So total return is actually income plus growth. Growth usually coming from unpredictable stock market investing. Income comes from interest and dividends, which can be much more predictable. At the Retirement Income Store, we create customized, actively managed portfolios that make sure your total return equals income plus growth. The Retirement Income Store, where retirees go for income.